It's one small step for man.
Out for the.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Here's What's Going On podcast with me, AJ. We're jumping right into the ABC's AJ's Book Corner with The Queen of the Unwanted by Jenna Glass. Alice smiled at her once more and frowned slightly as she glanced around her office, which was clearly laid out for formal discussions of business or social interactions. The only places to sit were the chairs without the desk. Instead of retreating to the comfort of her usual chair behind the desk, Alice turned the two chairs in front of it to face each other, then sat in one and indicated Siobhan should take the other. "I gather you're here for some official business," Alice said, "because surely you know you can call on me socially." She gave a self-deprecating shrug. "Within the natural constraints of my schedule, of course." "Yes, of course," Siobhan said, though she was pretty sure she was blushing. Even when she'd been the Queen of Alta, Siobhan had never felt comfortable presuming to call on people socially. She was about as unsocial a creature as existed, her tongue always tied in knots. She was well aware that the people of Alta considered Nandalites to be little more than barbarians, and everything about her, from her blonde hair to the guttural accent she had, never managed to shake, to her skin that was noticeably pale, even when tanned by the sun, screamed her Nandel heritage. Siobhan shifted uncomfortably and tried for a rueful smile. "You may be aware that social engagements have never been my strong suit. I'm well aware that others have made you feel that way," Alice replied staunchly, "but I like to think that you and I have gotten on just fine in the past." She leaned forward and put her hand on top of Siobhan's, giving it a squeeze. "You can call on me Siobhan whenever you like." Siobhan feared she might burst into tears, for it was true that Alice had never treated her like a barbarian, nor had she seemed annoyed by her former sister-in-law's awkward and halting conversational skills. Siobhan would do anything necessary to cement her place here in Women's Well, because the idea of being sent back to Nandel was unthinkable. Despite her fears, despite her discomfort with her confusing social status, despite her uncertainty over what her future would bring, Siobhan was happier adrift here in Women's Well than she had ever been before in her life, and she would not give it up without a fight. "Thank you, Alice," she said again, "but I do actually have official business to discuss, so scheduling an audience seemed appropriate." Alice nodded and leaned back in her chair. "Very well, then, what official business shall we talk about?" Siobhan bit her lip, aware that the request she wished to make was widely improper, so much so that she couldn't force herself to blurt it out without preamble. "There have been quite a number of weddings here in Women's Well since we declared our independence," she ventured. Alice cocked her head, her gazing intensifying. Siobhan suspected the sovereign princess quickly saw where Siobhan intended to lead the conversation. "Indeed, there have," Alice soon said, but she made no other comment. She might have already guessed what Siobhan was going to ask, but she apparently did not intend to ease the way for her. "Even women who were once Abigails have married," Siobhan continued. The corner of Alice's mouth twitched in a smile that was quietly suppressed. "To perfectly respectable gentlemen, no less. It seems that without an abbey to confine them and hide them from the eyes of the world, many of the women who were once considered unwanted have found they are very much wanted after all. Some of those women have been married before." This time Allison couldn't suppress a smile. "I know the concept of a woman remarrying after a divorce is terribly foreign to much of the world, but men have been doing it for a very long time. Frankly, it's never made much sense to me that the same was not true for women." And yet the idea had not even occurred to Siobhan until that first wedding. All her life she'd been taught that if a man divorced a woman, she was fully to blame for the disgrace, and that no one else would even consider marrying her. The Abbey had been a terrible specter, but it had also been the only place she could imagine a divorced woman living until she had come to Women's Well and seen another way. "So do you think," for all her determination, Siobhan found she could not finish the question, "that you might remarry?" Alice finished for her. Siobhan didn't dare meet the sovereign princess's eyes as she nodded, her hands bunching in her skirts, and with anxiety. Her palms were sweating, and she hoped she wouldn't leave embarrassing wet spots in the fabric. "I see no reason why not," Alice said, her voice still soft, as if she were afraid Siobhan might bolt if she spoke too loudly. "If you wish to remarry, that is. I cannot imagine marriage to Down the Mall would make you overly inclined toward the institution." Siobhan grimaced, for Alice spoke no more than the truth. Her marriage to Down the Mall had been miserable from the beginning, although she was keenly aware that other women were mistreated more than she had ever been. The idea of subjecting herself to the man's attentions once more, especially in the marriage bed, was far from appealing. However, being sent back to Nandel was even less appealing, and a marriage might save her from that fate. After all, if If she were to marry again, her father would no longer see her as his own property, but as her husband's, assuming she would accept a second marriage as legitimate. But so assuming he would accept a second marriage as legitimate, but that was a whole other question. If my choices are to be an Abigail or wife, I would prefer to be a wife, she said, but the sovereign princess frowned at her. Who says you have to be either one? See, that's why I like Allison. So, basically what Shelvana is discussing and talking about is she's scared to be sent back to Nandale, which is a place where she's from, where women have very, very less, like a whole lot less rights than other places. And her dad had sent Allison this message telling him to send her back to him because basically she's no longer married to the king. The king remarried, which is Allison's stepbrother, who's a terrible, terrible person. But basically, like, I really do like this book. I like the way it goes. But Allison, she lost her son. Well, she lost her daughter. And Shelvan was, when she was the king's wife, help Allison's son and her daughter escape Alta and bring them to her. And so basically, Janelle ended up dying, and the stepbrother is to blame for that. And Allison really hates him and stuff like that. But it's a really good book. If you get a chance to read it, start with Women's War if you like that, then go to the second one. There's also a third one called, is there a third one? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe there's not a third one. I thought there was a third one. I don't know. Yeah, but it's a really good book. But let's jump right into today's episode. We're discussing the 5 words that can break your life. What if it goes wrong or badly? The great plague of negative what ifs. Like, we can produce all the could go wrongs we want. The real work comes in reframing the thought process, that thought process specifically. In the article, The 5-Word Thought That Can Break Your Life by Jeffrey Bernstein, PhD, they instead talk about the 5-word phrase that can help build it. I can handle what happens. Trying to mentally prepare for the future can be beneficial. When not turning it into like rumination or overthinking and catastrophizing. And I had to learn that in situations where I'm fearful or feeling anxiety, I have to think about all the other things I faced and overcome in comparison to my current situation. And it's not easy, but it's helpful to begin practicing and reframing the negative what-if spiral. And this article really does captivate and help you understand like how detrimental it is to reframe that 5-word, what if it goes badly or what if it goes wrong? You know, that what if spiral, as I like to call it. It's really important to reframe it. I'm happy and I'm grateful for not being the type of person who has to constantly impose my will everywhere I go. I say this in relation to my recent nature walk where I kept seeing that someone had taken chalk and written messages on rocks and tree stumps. I have my own morals when it comes to using public places, and most of the time I'm functioning with the understanding that there needs to be a level of consideration that this is a shared space and to act accordingly. I don't need to leave pieces of me for people to know I was here. The people who know me are the people who have the pieces and the memories in them to share with others. I actually see, the specific situation as destruction of property, but maybe I'm being dramatic. Anyway, it just wasn't 1 or 2 chalk things. It was like every stump, this big large rock, they wrote this big long paragraph on it that had luckily been washed away by the rain already. Well, majority had been washed away by the rain, but it was like multiple stumps and rocks along the way. Like, it was excessive. And I'm just glad I have a better understanding of situations that allow for me to impose my will and when not to. And I always say this, some people, you have people in your life where it's like, man, there's always something. And the reason it's always something is because you're you. That person is themselves. And if they could just change their character, they would probably not have as many issues in their life as they have. But they're so used to being themselves everywhere they go. And I'm not saying don't be yourself. I'm not saying be fake either. I'm just saying act accordingly. Conduct yourself accordingly in a shared space. Have an understanding that the world doesn't revolve around you. you're not the only person here. It's like the issue I have with people where they're standing in the middle of the aisle with their cart. Like no one else is in the store. Like no one else needs to go down the aisle. You just lack self-awareness. You lack the understanding that you can't always impose your will on everything that you do and everywhere that you are, especially if it's a public shared space. But whatever. The quote, no one talks about how draining it is when your mood is constantly switching between keep going, it'll get better, and I can't do this anymore, I'm about to give up. Yeah, it can be draining. It can also be necessary, though. For me, I've had to reframe these emotions as well to basically it's just how life is. Life isn't meant to be experienced in only light. There are necessary moments of darkness and grace. And in those moments, I feel like I'm able to grow and learn more about myself. But before I go, be sure to check out the show notes. Also, check out my books on Amazon titled Poems to Cry to in the Dark and Love Letter Never Sent, and leave a 5-star rating. Other than that, I don't have anything else. I'm glad you're still here, and I hope you have the day you deserve. Bye!
One, giant leap.
For